Yeah, today we are very happy to have Phil Holliday from UKRI Research Office, who is going to give you major information about Horizon Europe. And we also will have our own Groen, who is going to talk later on about his EU journey, just to inspire you and to advise you. But what I'm going to do, I want to inspire you also just talking about success of Brunel and European funding, but also just to let you know how many resources and support is available. So if you want to apply to European funding, there is a lot of opportunity there. So if you can see on this slide, Brunel have very long successful track record of participating in European framework programs. There is statistic for FP7, for Horizon 2020, and despite of very difficult time, as you know, we so far secured 22 projects with cumulative value about 9 million euros, and still counting. Among them, there are some also some Marie Curie action projects. So that's here you can see some of website logos of some of these new projects. So yeah, there is Brunel is still doing very well in European funding, and to a certain extent, our success is due to the fact that we work with a lot of partners, network, and support services, of course, like UK Research Office, but we will hear much more from Phil about it, and about our network of UK national contact points for absolutely brilliant team supporting us with European funding. But also, I need to mention that I'm based in Brussels, so I have an opportunity to work, so to say, on the ground with a lot of network, go to meetings. For example, I'm also part of IGLO, informal group of liaison offices, Uniline, and also in Brussels there are very useful access. I have an access to regional offices, and there are a lot of events where you can also network and find partners for future projects. But also we work with a lot of through projects, because of our previous collaboration, we have a lot of universities and research organizations and industry we are working with. Here you can see some example, but it's far from full list of our partners and collaborators. One of them probably many of you are familiar with Tampere University, with whom we have strategic collaboration in various areas. But I also want to tell you about some of, in particular, about two networks or platforms with whom we are working with. One is YERON, is Young European Research Universities, and like I said, CrowdHelix couldn't make it, so I will give you some information about CrowdHelix on their behalf. So YERON stands for Young European Research Universities Network. It was founded 2016 and currently have 23 members from 16 European countries. So it gives a lot of opportunities to collaborate with universities across Europe. They have representation in Brussels, and what it basically do, they influence and advise European policies, promote collaboration. I am a member of Research Managers Working Group, and we exchange information, exchange collaborative opportunity, and also showcase, there is opportunity to showcase achievements in Brussels, which is actually a very good opportunity. So just to show you that YERON University are just spread across Europe, so again, it gives you a lot of opportunities to collaborate, and that's exactly the list of them, but you can check all of them once you receive presentations. Well, as I was also asked to do some promotion because Secretary General of UKRI, absolutely formidable lady, she is coming here to Brunel next week, this week, in fact tomorrow I think, and she is giving a talk about research mobility and open science, and if you are interested, again, you can come and talk for 12:30. 12:30 on 27th of April, she is giving a presentation there about year-end work. So that's a good opportunity if you have time. Sorry, I have to put 0 there. Then CrowdHelix. CrowdHelix is really big platform, and main aim of CrowdHelix is open innovation it is an open innovation platform which forges links between international network. It is massive platform, as you can see. It's over 11,000 members. It's a lot of industry. It's a lot of universities. Very, very good university. Oh, sorry, it's 630 organizations, but over 11,000 collaborators. And it spans 57 countries, and basically it's about forging collaboration, it's about forging European projects, and networking, of course, as well. So they connect with excellent research institutions, they deliver innovation project, and basically it's very, very useful. Again, a resource for finding partners and to get into European proposal. So they have over 40, I think, over 50 different clusters which are particularly focused on particular area, as you can see there. And Brunel is part of several of these clusters. But the major instrument is open innovation platform, where you can register, you can put your expertise there, or you can see what kind of expertise is needed for projects, so you have an opportunity to join the project. Unfortunately, there is a much more technical details which CrowdHelix guys were going to tell us, but I wouldn't go into it because it's really very special knowledge, but it's very easy to sign up for platform, and then you can find how you can find opportunity there. I'm happy to answer any question about it later. And finally, here we are. That's Research Support and Development Office. Why I have this picture? Because I want to tell you that we have support for European project through the whole life cycle of European projects. So we have post-award, well, of course, we have research development section. That's mostly Dina, Ali, myself. We support European projects. Then, if you have any problems with intellectual property or industry engagement, we have contracts and IP section. We have business development innovation section. Here is Hitesh from there. And we have post-award section. There is our colleagues here, Michelle in particular, helping us once project is funded. So you have a lot of support available for your proposal and for your project after. And that's so please come to talk to us initially if you're interested in applying for European funding. And that's me. So I think without further ado, I just invite Phil. Phil is from UK Research Office, and we work for a long time with UK Research Office successfully, and they are always brilliant team who was supporting us.
Thank you, Yulia. Thank you very much for inviting me today. Thank you to everyone who's taken the time out of your busy schedules to come and join. I think one of the first sort of in-person events at Brunel, I understand, or there's only a handful of them. So it's nice from my point of view at least, to be able to see you in person rather than doing this on Teams or Zoom or some other video conferencing software. So it's really nice to come over here and see Brunel. You even organised the sun, which is great. So I'll forever link Brunel with sunshine, so hopefully it's going to stay like this all the time. As Julie said, my name is Phil Holliday. I'm a European advisor from UKRI, the UK Research Office. I've got a few slides on who UKRI is at the moment. But really, I'm based over in Brussels with my colleagues and the main sort of mission of our organisation is to maximise the UK participation in Horizon Europe. I'm sure pretty much all of you will have been following the issues that the UK has had in terms of being involved in participating in Horizon Europe. So you'll understand that this has been a very tricky job to do over the last 2 or 3 years. But nevertheless, as Julia demonstrated in her slides, Brunel is still doing extremely well in Horizon Europe, and we haven't even associated to the program yet. So I think that's a real strong message for those of you who maybe have slight doubts in your mind. Please do continue to apply, because there is funding and opportunities available, even if we haven't officially associated at the moment. So just a little bit about UKRI. We are based over in Brussels. We are this unique partnership between UKRI, UK Research and Innovation. We're sort of their Brussels office, so we represent them over in Brussels. But we also have this sort of unique aspect where we support over 140 organisations, most of them based in the UK, most of them universities, that subscribe, to pay to have access to our services. So the services that we offer are access to myself, so I'm the dedicated European advisor for Brunel, so if you have any questions, please do drop me an email. I'm happy to answer your questions that you have on Horizon Europe. And also we have access to our website portal, which I'll talk again a bit more about later on as well. There's a huge amount of information there that you can access that will help you, hopefully, to be able to apply. Our office, UKRI, is also the UK national contact point for the European Research Council and for the Marie Skłodowska-Curie Actions. So these are two specific parts, two schemes of Horizon Europe, which I'm sure you've probably heard of. If you've not heard of any other part of Horizon Europe, you've probably heard of the ERC and MSCA. So we're the national contact points. What does that mean? This is a position nominated by DSET, what was previously BASE, to certain organisations to be able to offer free advice to anyone who wishes to apply to those two particular schemes and who is wishing to do that funding within the UK. So our organisation, and I'm actually the NCP for the European Research Council, so if you have any questions about applying to the ERC, then drop us an email and it'll be myself or one of my colleagues who'll get back to you on that. Just a couple of things which I've added to this slide as well. So we are the national contact point for ERC and MSCA, but we're also, as of the beginning of this year, the UK national contact point for the widening participation. So this again is a certain part of Horizon Europe, which, as the name suggests, it's really there to try to allow the sort of less successful member states or less successful areas of the European Union to be more successful in applying to Horizon Europe funding. So the specific calls, and there are actually calls which the UK can participate to try and help to sort of pass knowledge on to these less experienced regions. And we're also the country national coordinator for cost actions. And again, you might have heard of cost actions. If you're not familiar with European funding, you may have heard of cost actions. These are is funding available for networking activities, secondments. There's no funding for actual research, but you can bring together groups of like-minded people. And cost actions are are a useful way of getting involved, dipping your toes in European funding. Then you set yourself up with a consortium that you can apply to other funding at a later on stage. So again, if you're interested in applying to cost actions, then please do drop us an email. Something else just to mention as well, I mentioned the portal. We've got a wealth of information on our portal. We've just recently launched a new portal, and that's a sort of screenshot from our lovely new portal. It should be a lot easier to access for those of you who did access our old portal. Hopefully that will be the case. There's better search functionality, there's improved security as well, which of course is very important these days. So again, this is part of Brunel's subscription to UKRI. If you haven't already registered on our portal, this is my little plug, then please do register. You just put your Brunel email account in there, set up a free account, then you can receive our newsletters on a daily or weekly basis, and these newsletters include information you can select. You can personalize the newsletters. If you're interested in the ERC, for example, then you can just tick that box and you'll only receive any articles based on the ERC. So again, just a little plug for you to sign up to that as well. Okay, so moving on to association and the UK's participation in Horizon Europe. Again, I'm sure a lot of you have probably been following this over the years, so you will know this, but I'll sort of start from the beginning just to set the scene and so that we know where we are. So back at the end of 2020, the UK and the EU concluded negotiations on what was known as the UK-EU Trade and Cooperation Agreement. This agreement covers a huge number of things, as the name suggests, but of most importance to us is that it included the announcement that the UK intended to associate to 3 different areas of European funding, to Horizon Europe, to Euratom, and to Copernicus as well. At that time, the European Commission created a Q&A document, that sort of bottom one on the bottom right. And again, if you've not read it, when you get these slides, click on that hyperlink or just put it into Google and it will probably come up fairly high at the top. But I would strongly recommend you to read this Q&A document because it very clearly states that the UK is eligible to apply prior to the formal association to the programme. So we can apply and still have the same status as we did in previous programmes as well. If you do have any European partners who are sort of doubting the ability of you to be part of a project, and point them into the direction of this document, and that usually sort of ends the debate at that particular point. And again, we've been following this for many years, so have a look on our website and if you'd like any further information. So just to go on to the Commission's Q&A to pick out the key things, it's not a particularly long document, I think it's only about 3 or 4 pages. But it confirms that the UK is eligible in terms of its full association. So as a UK partner, you can participate in every single part of Horizon Europe. There isn't a bit that you can't. There is one tiny exception, which is something called the European Innovation Fund, and this is the equity funding for the European Innovation Council Accelerator Scheme. And this scheme is focused solely on SMEs. It's about sort of getting their ideas, accelerating their ideas and getting it to market. So it's of no interest to UK universities. So in essence, you will be able to access all parts of Horizon Europe. It gives UK the full rights to participate in the first Horizon Europe calls, and we have the same rights as EU partners as well. We're now considered an associated country because we've left the European Union, but that means that the UK can participate you can coordinate projects, you can put yourself down as a coordinator, and you can request a budget from the European Commission, and you should be requesting a budget from the European Commission in all the proposals that you submit to Horizon Europe, including Marie Skłodowska-Curie Actions, including ERC, including the collaborative bids as well, including the more innovative stuff as well. And this is all very important things. The reason I'm sort of labouring these points, it will become a bit clearer later on. So the key message, as Julia was saying, is please do continue to apply. We are eligible, the UK is eligible according to the Commission, so there's no issues that any proposal won't be deemed ineligible because there is a UK partner involved in it, so please do keep applying. And the big caveat, of course, is should the UK not have associated by the time your successful proposal needs to sign, you need to sign on the grant agreement. That is the point in which you would have to sort of change the status of Brunel from a beneficiary receiving funding from the Commission to an associated partner receiving funding from the guarantee, the UKRI guarantee, which again I'm sure you've probably heard of, but I will again talk about it a bit more in the next couple of slides. But if you've got any questions about that, then please do contact myself or Julia and the team. We all sort of, have been doing this for the last couple of years, so we're very familiar with how to deal with this sort of current situation. So where are we at the moment? We're in this sort of orange square on the left-hand side, where the UK's association to Horizon Europe is pending. It still hasn't happened yet. What do you need to do? You need to submit as a beneficiary, as I said before. And should you be successful and the UK still hasn't associated, we're still in the orange box, then you change your status to associated partner at that particular moment, and then you apply for the guarantee funds. Then there's sort of two options that we can go from there, and hopefully we'll be moving soon, although I can't say when, but I'm feeling a bit more positive now than I have been for a number of years. Hopefully we'll move to the top right, the light blue situation where the UK actually does associate to Horizon Europe. At that point, then you submit as a beneficiary, as you were doing before, but now you receive funding directly from the European Commission in euros. You no longer need to apply to UKRI to receive your funding in pound sterling. The other option, of course, is the bottom right one is, and hopefully we don't move into this situation, but it could be a position where the UK chooses not to associate or is unable or doesn't want to associate to Horizon Europe for political reasons or otherwise. In that particular case, then you would need to change how you would apply. Then you would apply as an associated partner with UK funding, applying to UKRI most likely for for funding from that. And the UK government will put in some transitional measures, some schemes in place to help support any UK partners should they find themselves in that situation. And again, I've got some more slides on that as well. I also just sort of added my own little square there, the Windsor framework, because again, I'm sure you've all sort of been following the news over the last couple of months, where there's this agreement has been reached and signed and ratified to resolve the Northern Ireland Protocol issues, which is the Windsor framework. And this has really been the block in terms of the UK's association. This is why nothing has happened over the last couple of years. So now this block has been removed. We're in this phase where the UK and the EU are currently renegotiating this, and I'm sure you've been reading all the articles about this. It's essentially coming down to how much money the UK needs to pay to be part of Horizon Europe now that we've missed 2 years out of a 7-year framework program. And hopefully that discussion is moving in a positive direction, and when both sides have agreed, we'll be able to sort of move on to association and sort of, move away from the whole guarantee issue that we find ourselves. As I was saying before, I don't know if this will happen. I can't say if that's happening, if that will happen, but I am feeling a lot more positive than I have over the last couple of years. Okay, just to mention a bit more, if for any projects, so the ones that Yulia mentioned that were successful under Horizon Europe, they would have become associated partners. They would have changed their status from beneficiary to associated partner. And a lot of people get a bit nervous, get worried about this change in status and think, oh, I'm no longer a beneficiary. I'm going to lose my status, and I'm not going to be that important in a project. And that's not the case. This is really just to highlight the point that an associated partner, that's a term the Commission uses to mean it's someone, an organisation involved in a project, but you don't receive EU funding. That's all an associated partner means. You don't sign the grant agreement because you're not receiving any funding from the Commission, but you still implement important parts of the project, and so you are an important member of that consortium. You're not just a bolt-on or add-on at the bottom. You are still an integral member of that consortium. And the grant agreement should mention what you're going to do, and it should mention your roles as well, even though you don't sign the grant agreement. So key message, I'll repeat it again, keep applying to Horizon Europe, keep applying as a beneficiary. You need to do this because to be eligible to apply to the guarantee, you need to have requested a budget from the Commission. If you don't request a budget from the Commission, then you are ineligible to apply to the guarantee. So this is a very sort of important caveat to remember. So make sure you apply as a beneficiary, request an EU budget, and then should you need to apply to the guarantee, then you just apply to UKRI and convert the amount in euros to pound sterling. The guarantee, I'll talk about this, I think, I'll get on to that in a second. So again, we've got a huge amount of information on our portal if you'd like to know more. We've done quite a few webinars where my colleague Boaget Thomas has talked through the process of changing your status from a beneficiary to an associated partner. So if you are in that position and you would like to find out more information, then please do just click on that webinar when you get these slides, and you can watch that, and he talks through what you need to do and what the expectations of the coordinator and the project officer are as well. Okay, so moving on to the guarantee, which I've mentioned quite a few times now. The guarantee has been set up about a year and a half ago now. It's there to support UK applicants who've successfully applied to Horizon Europe, have been eligible to apply, but have been unable to receive funding from the Commission due to this delay in association. It covers all types of EU grants, so mono-beneficiary, ERC, Marie Curie, to the multi-beneficiary collaborative bids to Pillar 2. And the funding is for the lifetime of the grant. So if you apply to the guarantee, you will have to receive guarantee funding for the 3, 4, 5, however many years long the project is. Be aware that because it's being funded by UKRI, you need to follow or adhere to UKRI's terms and conditions. But UKRI is trying its best to follow the spirit of the actual scheme that it's supporting, if you get my drift. So in terms of Marie Skłodowska-Curie Actions, it's all about people movement, so that UKRI is trying to allow to enable that to happen within its sorts of terms and conditions. And you'll receive 100% of what you applied for in EU eligible costs paid, and it will be converted with a specific exchange rate. If you have any more questions about the guarantee, then you can contact the UKRI guarantee team directly, or speak to your Brunel team. They have more than enough expertise about this over the last couple of years as well. Again, if you've been following the guarantee, you will know this already. It's been extended a number of times, about 4 or 5 times. I think it's been extended 4 times. We're in the 5th wave of the guarantee. It only really, the UK government sets it up for 3 months and then extends it every so often. But the idea is this guarantee will cover, so the current extension now covers any Horizon Europe call that closes on or before the 30th of June 2023. So I appreciate that's pretty soon, and I appreciate that after the coffee break I'm going to be talking about calls with deadlines in September. What I can't say is that the guarantee will be extended again, but what I can say is that it's been extended 4 times, and read into that how you will. But please do continue to apply to Horizon Europe calls, even if the deadlines are after the 30th of June. We might associate by that point as well, who knows, and if that's the case, then we no longer need the guarantee funding. And then just some statistics just to show, just as Julia was saying, that Brunel have done so well in terms of Horizon Europe funding. That funding has been supported by the guarantee. These are some statistics generated by UKRI up to the end of March. Again, you might have seen in the news at the beginning of April, there was a bit of a sort of, I don't know if it was a press release, or there was an announcement that the value that guarantees actually issued has hit £1 billion. So we're just under £1 billion there, but it has actually gone over that mark already. So it's a huge amount of funding that UKRI is offering and supporting, and it's sort of ironic in a way that it's now become sort of one of the biggest sort of funding schemes that UKRI is supporting in a sort of very short space of time. But again, just to give you that sort of, to support it, to allay any fears that you have, there's a huge amount of funding out there to support you, and a huge number of successful UK applicants have been supported by the guarantee as well. Okay, so I'll just move very briefly onto the transitional measures. So these are in that sort of situation, the sort of bottom one, which the least ideal situation, where the UK decides we don't want to be part of Horizon Europe. What will happen in that particular case? And again, if you've been following the news, you'll probably know a lot about what I'm about to talk about. But should the UK decide not to associate, then two things will happen. First of all, there will be some sort of short-term support put in place by the UK government, and these are these kind of transitional measures. The government sort of announced this last summer, which, again, you may or may not have read. I've just picked out the sort of main things there in the sort of blue square on the right-hand side. So these transitional measures will mean that the guarantee scheme that's already open will automatically be extended to cover any calls up to the point in which the UK decides not to associate. So hopefully that will give you the confidence to see that the guarantee will support those calls up to the point of non-association. Any particular proposals that are in flight, and the Commission, so they've been submitted to the Commission, but the Commission decided because the UK is now no longer associating, we're going to make them ineligible. There will be a scheme or support put in place to be able to take those proposals and evaluate them sort of within UKRI and be able to fund those as well. So don't worry if you put in a proposal and it's been deemed ineligible later on. There will be support for that. There will be uplifts to different talent schemes, innovation funding. There will be uplifts to international innovation schemes, QR funding for research institutions, and sort of the key one, which I put in the red box, a continued funding for third country participation in Horizon Europe. So there will be some calls in Horizon Europe where it will say third country. So a third country is basically anyone who's not a member state or an associated country. So Switzerland, for example, US, Australia. They would be third countries, and the UK, we would move into that group if we decided not to associate. So the UK government would put together a funding scheme to allow applicants to be able to apply as a third country to a collaborative bid, for example, and get funding from the UK, much like the guarantee, but done in a slightly different way. So again, support there to be able to apply and be part of these collaborative bids. And then the big news that happened over the Easter break was the UK government published this Pioneer prospectus. This is the sort of longer-term alternative, the Plan B, as it used to be termed. Now it's called Pioneer. So should the UK choose to walk away and not associate, then there will be this scheme launched later on, in which will support these different areas. So there will be support for talent, support for sort of global opportunities, of which there will be this sort of third country participation aspect as well for Horizon Europe. So there will still be this element of engaging with Horizon Europe, but not in its full extent, of course. There'll be support for innovation, and there'll be support for infrastructure as well. So if you haven't seen this prospectus yet, again, when you get these slides, you can sort of click through and read through it, or just Google it and it'll come up at the top. It doesn't go into too much detail. The prospectus is a bit light on detail, but it's much more sort of high level. But it's really just, it's there so that you have confidence to know that should the UK decide not to associate, then there will be something else put in place to be able to fill the gaps of not being able to participate in Horizon Europe. Okay, so I think these are just some more links to certain things. They're there for your information. And then I thought I'll just pause here before I moved on to Horizon Europe, because I know there's usually a lot of questions at this point. So if anyone's got any questions, I'll attempt to answer them.
So I have a very practical question for me. So I am putting together an ERC synergy grant with partners in Spain and in the Netherlands. And you were encouraging people to coordinate calls. However, it sounds a bit complicated to take a coordinated role in a scenario where we may drop out and then become a third country partner. So can you elaborate on that specifically?
Yeah, it's just Brunel still decided not to take the lead coordinated role because at the negotiation stage, because of you have to change the status, it means you have to change the whole.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's so much work that space. So from experience, we've said it's best for the UK not to lead at the moment because it's just a huge amount of work and reworking the whole.
Yeah. So that's the decision we've taken, but
yeah,
it's slightly contrary to what you
you can officially, in the rules say we're totally eligible to do that. But in order to save all that work and that revamping of your proposal at negotiation stage, you know, if you really wanted to do it, you could make a case to do it. It's just we would advise not to because of that work involved in changing if UK status stays the same.
Yeah.
Officially we can, according to the rules we can, but it's just a huge amount of work at that stage, so to avoid that, we recommend that you don't.
And can I ask one more question related to that? So what is currently the status of Switzerland in ERC grants and specifically the synergy ones?
Okay, so the question is what's the status of ERC in terms of Horizon Europe and ERC in particular? So again, just for those of you unaware, Switzerland have been sort of kicked out, if that's not the official term, but excluded from being involved in Horizon Europe. And this happened in Horizon 2020 as well, for those of you long in the tooth and involved in that. They missed out about 2 or 3 years. So Switzerland used to be an associated country in Horizon 2020, and then at the beginning of Horizon Europe, due to, again, sort of political negotiations with the European Union, they were sort of no longer allowed to be associated or be in the process of associating to Horizon Europe. So Swiss partners are considered third country. The Swiss government has actually set up a fantastic scheme to support their Swiss participation in Horizon Europe projects. It's very clear and easy, and in some ways it's a bit easier for them because it's more black and white, they're out, whereas we're in a very much a grey area, so it's much more difficult for us in the UK to sort it out. But for the Swiss, they know they're out, their government has set up third country funding, they have very clear guidance on Marie Curie, on ERC as well. So is this related to synergy, you mean? Or okay, so for the synergy grant, so synergy is when you can have up to 4 principal investigators in an ERC grant. It's not just one principal investigator, it's up to 4. Synergy, you're allowed to have 1 third country principal investigator, one principal investigator based in a third country host institution. So you could have someone in Switzerland fill that role as well, and that would be fine, and they would receive funding from the Commission.
Would it be okay for this particular scenario to have, under the present circumstances, to have a UK partner and a Swiss partner?
So I mean, I can't say because I can't go, look in the future. And to say the synergy call isn't covered by the guarantee as it stands now because the synergy deadline is in November, but it may be extended, of course. So at the moment, what I would say, and I guess it depends a bit on what the Brunel team say as well. My advice would be just apply as you see fit. Pick the team, the consortium that works best for your idea. If it involves a Swiss partner, it works at the moment because we are considered associated country, and then we will sort of fix the problems later on. Looking at the previous synergy call, there were a number of successfully funded projects which had 2 UK PIs or 1 UK PI and a third country PI, and they were funded either by the ERC or under the guarantee. So it's possible. But I would say just do whatever works you think is going to make you the most successful, and then we can figure out the details later on.
Okay.
Yes.
It's not a question actually. It's just a reflection. I mean, when was Brexit referendum? 2017? 16. 7 years ago, right? And at that time, obviously there was a lot of doubt about, are we going to be able to apply for European funding? And in all this time, the people who went ahead and did apply have been, a lot of them have been successful. Nothing has stood in their way, basically, really. Whereas those who were put off thought it's too risky, they were left crying. Do you know what I mean? So it's just a general comment that I think, you know, even if you're not 100% sure that you might not, I mean, you might waste your time anyway. The application might be turned down. But what I'm saying is the people who were bold and they went ahead anyway, they're laughing now, and the ones who were a little bit more cautious, they're not. So it's just a reflection. That doesn't mean to say that we can see the future, but it's just judging by the past. That's what happened.
Following on from that reflection, you know, across the UK, people have been put off with all this uncertainty. But I view that quite positively in a way, because within the UK then, the competition for these funds has gone down. You've got less UK competitors, right? And at the same time, what I would mention is, you know, part of research, a major part of research development is the recycling of bids. So, you know, it's very difficult to let a good bid go to waste. And even if you are applying, even if there's uncertainty, even if for whatever reason it doesn't go through to EU funding, we'll try our best to find somewhere else to get that money for you. If you've done all the work, you've got the partners, it's a good research idea, there's never funds out there. Thank you.
Sorry, can I also comment on my colleague's I also think that sometimes people put off when they put together a consortium, and then European partners come and say, well, we're not sure about UK participation, how it works, where they get money. But you just have to be aware that there is a lot of kind of off-shelf note or brief which we have to reassure partners, because that does become a problem sometimes, and something obstacle which we have people to comply. Say that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, sorry, Peter.
Phil, I don't know if has there been a lot of UK organisations that set up a legal entity somewhere else to get around this? And has it worked?
Yes, there have been a number of UK universities who have set up legal entities in Europe. Has it worked? I don't think so, because the problem is when it comes to the evaluation, the evaluators will only look at that legal entity in Germany or where it is. They won't look at the UK part of it, and so therefore you're suddenly less successful because you don't have that history of being successful in applying for research funding. So it's not necessarily worked in that situation. That no one found a loophole around that, unfortunately.
Sorry, can I add to that? Because it's actually a model people did look at. One thing to remember, and that's coming back even before Brexit, let's say it's US who wanted to get, US organization wants to get a fund, and they set up something in Belgium. The problem is that let's say they're successful, the money and the work still has to be done, where the money will come to this Belgium, let's say Belgium subsidiary. And that means that if it's just shell office or something like that, so it doesn't really help, because the money and the work, again, has to be done on that particular place. So let's say Brunel has subsidiary, again, in Belgium. That means that the work has to be done there, not here in Brunel, and the money will come not to Brunel's in London, but in Belgium. Just from my experience.
Okay, thanks. I think in the interest of time, I've still got another 10 minutes. Sorry, Derek. I'll be very quick. I think it's a good debate. Let's talk about it over the coffee. I'll just quickly move on to Horizon Europe, because I'm conscious I haven't actually introduced it to you all. So a very whistle-topped tour of Horizon Europe for those of you unfamiliar with it. It's the EU's flagship program for research and innovation, running for 7 years, so it will end at the end of 2027. It has an overall budget over those 7 years of just under 100 billion euros, so it's the biggest research funding program anywhere in the world, I would say. And the Commission has this ambition that it will be there to shape the future of Europe, and making Horizon Europe the most ambitious R&I program ever introduced. The Commission, of course, this is taxpayers' money, European taxpayers' money. So of course, a lot of what this funds, a lot of the projects that Horizon Europe funds need to address these European political priorities or meet these particular agendas that the Commission has set up, and you can see quite a few here as well. When we go through the work programs, which I'll talk about after the coffee break, again you'll probably see mentions to policy and strategy documents as well, and that's because the Commission needs to link what they're funding, what they want, what they're asking you to do, with what they say they're going to do in the future in terms of sort of policies. So it's there to meet all those particular areas under the aim as well. This is what Horizon Europe looks like. It's sort of split into 3 different pillars, and there's a sort of cross-cutting one as well. Pillar 1 is called the excellence pillar. It's sort of the so-called bottom-up pillar, where it's up to you as the applicant really to decide. There's no specific areas that you need to focus on. You can choose and apply in any particular area that you want. The European Research Council funds frontier research for individuals, for one principal investigator and their team. The Marie Skłodowska-Curie Actions is there. It's a very successful European scheme. It's there to support mobility of researchers. And after the coffee break, I will talk about the postdoctoral fellowship scheme of Marie Curie's Actions. Research Infrastructures is there to support collaborative projects that support these European and global research infrastructures. And then moving on to the Pillar 2, this is called the Global Challenges in European Industrial Competitiveness. And again, from the title, you can immediately assume that, and correctly, that it's very much focused at industry. It's much more specific on addressing priorities that the Commission has and EU industry has as well. And that's reflected in what is supported under these particular 6 different clusters. So Pillar 2 supports collaborative bids. This is where you need to bring European partners together and address specific calls that have been highlighted by the Commission. There are these 6 clusters. So after coffee, I'm going to be focusing on calls that have a deadline in September for the health cluster, cluster 1, the sort of top one there, and also cluster 4, the climate, energy, and mobility cluster as well. So I'll go into a bit more detail if I think Julia said before, those are the areas of most interest to most of you who signed up for today. So hopefully that is the case, and I'll go into those in much more detail. Pillar 3 is the Innovative Europe pillar, and again, as the name suggests, it's there to support innovation at a European level. Something new in Horizon Europe was this European Innovation Council, which has been set up to replicate the success of the European Research Council, but more for innovators and businesses as well. So the idea is that if you are an innovator, you have an idea, and you need help to scale it up or to develop it further, then you can apply to the European Innovation Council to be able to do that. There are still opportunities in Pillar 3 for universities to be involved in it. Some of it is very much sort of closer to market, and there may not be any sort of areas of interest. But particularly within the Pathfinder calls and the transition calls of the European Innovation Council, there's a lower TRL level, so you may have ideas yourself which you are looking to develop further, or you may be thinking of working with an SME or a company and sort of helping them to develop their particular ideas. So you can apply to the EIC to be able to do that. And then the cross-cutting areas, the widening participation, I sort of touched upon this as well. The widening participation is there to help the newer member states and the less successful areas of the European Union to be able to be more successful in applying to Horizon Europe. So to be as successful as France and Germany, etc., in applying for Horizon Europe, and to try and to make sure that brain circulation happens across the whole of the European Union as well. Another part of Horizon Europe which gets talked about quite a lot is these missions. It doesn't actually sit anywhere on this particular diagram, but it's generally that the funding for the missions comes from Pillar 2, so that's where it sort of fits. So the clusters really support the mission of the missions. Okay, and then just the final couple of slides looking at the budget and how it's split. The lion's share over the 7 years is to Pillar 2. It's there to support much closer to market activity, so it requires a bigger budget to be able to do that. There's still quite a lot of funding available for Pillar 1, the sort of blue bit on the right, as well, 25 billion euros. So there is a significant amount for lower, more fundamental research as well. And then again, just to sort of give you a bit of a taste for this afternoon, the session after the coffee break, where I'll be looking specifically at the current work program, which is the 2023-24. I'll talk more about what a work program is then. But these are the sort of current calls, what you can apply for now. It's a 2-year work program. There's 13.5 billion euros available over the 2 years. And this is just to give you a bit of a flavor of the number of different topics that are available in those particular areas as well. So there's a huge amount of opportunities to be able to apply and be successful in funding as well. Okay, so are there any questions at this point? I think we sort of answered the questions in the first session. Any follow-on questions?
All right. Basically, well, first of all, I'm going to share some of my thoughts, but please do interrupt me, ask questions, or if something is strange or you want to know a little bit more, let me know. Obviously, well, I've had some successful grants. I also had a lot of failed proposals. I would like to share those as well. I'm Dutch actually, so in my Dutch nature, I like to flaunt my failures as much as my successes. So let's start with that. Boom, 10 failed Horizon 2020 proposals. But I also had 4.5 successful ones. So I've been writing quite a lot of proposals. So yeah, there were some comments about writing EU proposals after Brexit. So I was sort of not the courageous camp, more the obnoxious camp, in that I thought I just keep writing EU proposals, and if they get rejected or discarded for silly reasons, then I'll just move elsewhere. Fortunately for me, that hasn't happened. None of my proposals got discarded. I did have one occasion where I was preparing a proposal, a follow-on proposal, and it got taken off because that particular call was no longer supported by the UK, or actually not supported to begin with. I'll get onto that a bit later, but I thought this is a nice picture to show, like, okay, somebody who spends a lot of time writing EU proposals and various proposals, how does that end up? So in my case, I started in 2015, and before I started at Brunel, I was writing an EU proposal called COMPAT. It was about computational patterns for large-scale computing. That proposal got funded, but I was still a postdoc at UCL, so I didn't get any funding. I was also not associated, but actually, together with another postdoc, I wrote a proposal, and that expertise was gone. So what I ended up doing is I ended up joining the consortium as an unfunded partner so that I could contribute technically. And that turned out to be a really good move. I did get 0K funding. They really didn't want to give me any funding, even though they underspent at the end. But the time after, there was a follow-on proposal called VECMA, and they wanted me to coordinate the proposal. I said, okay, I'm not going to do that. I've never been part of a proposal, so I'm not going to coordinate it. But I became the technical manager. We wrote a proposal. We got very good reviews. I think about 13.5 out of the 15 points that you can get. And that was my first proposal, basically, which ran from 2018 to 2021. At the same time, when I joined Brunel, I started working in a very new field of research, migration modeling, and basically almost nobody was doing it. And then there was also an existing center of excellence on geospatial simulations. And they said, well, yeah, we're interested in this conference paper you wrote about migration modeling. Can we collaborate informally? So I started collaborating with this Center of Excellence on Geospatial Simulations. And what I heard years later was that consortium was basically a huge mess. And at the end of that project, the consortium broke in 2 parts. And each half basically wrote a proposal for the follow-up call competing against the other half primarily. And it was basically the infrastructure partners and the application partners, and they split off. And then I ended up with the infrastructure partners because they reached out to me and they wanted Brunel as an application partner. So we wrote a proposal for that. I didn't spend a huge amount of time on it because it was one of these Center of Excellence infrastructure proposals where research has a role, but it's not necessarily the central thing. But yeah, that did get granted. So then all of a sudden, in a span of about 3-4 months, I got 2 large EU grants at the same time. And then I failed my probation, by the way, but that's a separate story. Anyway, the year after, so those both are 2018 to 2021, The year after, I basically said, okay, I can't be PI on the EU proposal because these two are really big. But there was a specific call on migration modeling, which sort of had my research work written on the back of it. So then I linked up with Alexandra Xantaki from the law department, and together we took part in the IT flows project on migration modeling. And that got funded the year after. It was the best one out of the 24. And the second best one didn't get funded, but I actually was also involved in that proposal because I had a bit of an edge. I had a code that nobody else had. So there were two of the best proposals ended up asking me as a partner, which was very intriguing. The stamina proposal is a different story. So what happened with that proposal was there was a proposal before that, and through Hidalgo I got a link and they said, okay, yeah, we're going to do a proposal on pandemic management. Would you like to be involved? And I said, sure. That initial proposal got rejected, so that's Panakia proposal here, because it was a bit too vague. But then the person was quite junior, insisted like, okay, in the next call we're just going for it again. And in that call there were 6 proposals. It was 10 million over 2 years, and it was an innovation action, so quite applied. And a lot of consortia got scared off. So there were only 6 proposals in the call, and 4 of them were ineligible because they didn't have the right partners with the right expertise. There were very strict requirements about health organizations, crisis organizations, to be part of the consortium. So 4 proposals got discarded in the early round. And then 2 proposals were remaining. They competed against each other, and then Stamina made it through. And yeah, I was co-I on the proposal. My colleague Anastasia Anagnostou was PI on the proposal. And of course it got extended, like almost every EU project, so it's a 2.5 year project in the end. But yeah, that's the 4th proposal. Now after that, I had a lot of rejections. I'll try to explain on that a little bit later, because I think there's a bit of reasons why that happens. But I did get a UKRI proposal on the Excalibur initiative for exascale computing. And that one is interesting because the program that VECMA was part of, Future and Emerging Technologies, that one took a bit of an unlucky turn, because what happened with both these calls, well, this one sort of disappeared, and this one was for the Centers of Excellence. That got moved to an initiative that is called EuroHPC. And basically, Hidalgo has a follow-up project, and they involved me in that project. But then during the proposal stage, it was clear that UK partners could not only not be funded through EuroHPC, but EuroHPC was not allowed to have any collaboration with UK partners at all, not even unfunded. In fact, they couldn't even use our open source code. So they had to completely delete us from the proposal. And what happened actually is that the 15 partners from Hidalgo, out of the 15, only 6 remained, because the UK wasn't the only victim of EuroHPC. But for example, an Austrian partner also had to drop out, because the Austrian government wasn't willing to match the funding that that particular program required. So it's not even exclusively due to Brexit, but because in the computer science topics they rearranged these programs, there has been a lot of collateral damage in EU programs for the UK, and not only because of Britain or because of politics, but also because what has been happening on the EU level. So yeah, I did fall victim to that a little bit. On the left, I put some of the failed proposals. The reason I put them there is, first of all, to show that, yeah, there were a lot of successes, but also a lot of failures, but also to give you some ideas about the kind of reasons why proposals failed. In all the proposals, I wasn't the coordinator. I was one of the partners, often a bit of a major partner, leading a work package. In some cases, I was the technical manager. But yeah, some of the reasons, for instance, that proposals got rejected, and I think probably using the mouse is the easiest. What seems really important, in my opinion, through these 20 or so proposals, is the consortium. So very often a call is quite broad and has to cover a lot of areas and tick a lot of boxes. And quite a few of my proposals got rejected because the consortium didn't actually tick all those boxes. So, for example, there were pandemic calls for proposals for models on pandemics, and then we didn't have enough health authorities or experimental expertise in the consortium. Sometimes the consortium was there, had the right mix of expertise, like with XPLEAN, But actually, the terminology was so different that the proposal itself, we really struggled to make it coherent because the diversity of disciplines, we just couldn't bridge it. So there was a lot of confusion, and it ended up with a very vague and ambiguous proposal. And then also in general, being specific seems to be very important. So you really have to look at the call and be very specific to that. But this is also a bit like as a partner in an EU consortium proposal, you're a few people on the ship. And sometimes the whole consortium goes down a completely wrong direction, and you have to make a choice and say, okay, am I going to step in, intervene, and pull this whole thing back on what I think is the right track, which you might not be sure of? Or are you just going to sit in, go along for the ride, and think, well, perhaps they know better, and who knows, perhaps it gets funded. I've tried both approaches. In terms of success rate, I'm not sure there's much difference. But the thing is, it is an important consideration to make, because if you want to steer the whole consortium towards a certain direction, you will be spending a lot more effort. So you can make a trade-off. And what I generally recommend is that even if a consortium doesn't go down the direction you like, stay on it and be constructive. And who knows, it might just end up being funded. So for instance, I remember the Hidalgo proposal. They started seriously on it 2 weeks before the deadline. And basically what happened is things were expected at the end of business day, and then the main coordinator would start his work at the end of business day, and then the next morning he would provide new things. He was basically working 20-hour days. I didn't think that was going to work, but it got funded. So, that's how the cookie crumbles sometimes. Anyway, that was a very long slide. Okay, so a bit about EU consortia. First of all, what do they look for in my experience? Because I guess a lot of people sort of think, okay, how can I be useful for an EU consortium and actually be involved in these proposals? Well, I mean, the most important thing is to have something that consortia look for. First of all, reliable past partners are really important. That can be formal partners from previous projects, but it can also be informal collaborations that have been really fruitful, that produce papers or exchange events or perhaps smaller grants. Because the people consortia have worked well with in the past often form the core of a future proposal, and then they supplement that with organizations that have the expertise that they need for that particular call. If you have a unique expertise or working in an under-researched area, that's going to give you a huge advantage, particularly if there's a call emerging that hits your expertise. So that's what happened in my case with IT flows, because then all of a sudden multiple projects will approach you and say, okay, could you take part? Now this is really hard, because what you need to do is you need to work on an area that's going to be a hype 1 or 2 years from now. So don't work with ChatGPT, but think about, okay, what's going to happen after that, for instance, and try to think, okay, what is going to be important on the longer run? And then by anticipating that, you could be lucky, or you might miss the ball. They will look a little bit for prominent names and reputable organizations. What I find quite interesting is that Brunel actually has a reasonably good reputation in the EU arena, at least in computation. It's not been too bad. So yeah, at least we don't have a strike against like some of the other institutions. So I think that is positive. Again, organizations that they've worked with directly. Don't underestimate informal collaborations. If, for instance, an EU project would like to work with you because you give a nice use case or example, or you provide some access to data, and you do some voluntary work and you give them some favors, then they realize, okay, this is a reliable partner, I can trust them, and then very often they're keen to involve you in future projects. And I think creating that kind of goodwill without expecting back can often pay off in the long run. It will not pay off in the short run. It will be a little bit frustrating in the short run, but in the long run it can often pay off. Similarly with the proposal writing. So when you work on EU proposals, don't think about the proposal you're working on at the moment, but also think about all the future proposals. So you might be asked for an EU proposal that is not particularly good. You think it gets 9 out of 15 points or something, according to your own estimates. The thing is, you can then say, okay, I'll take a backseat, it's not going to be funded anyway. Well, then you won't be asked next time either, because you're not pulling your weight. Or you can say, okay, look, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to try and do my best without wasting a huge amount of time, but do my best and try to improve the quality of the proposal, steer it at least in the right direction, try to be involved and fill the gaps. And then the other partners in the consortium will see like, okay, this partner is pulling his or her weight, if there's a next call with a different proposal, I'm more likely to include that partner because at least I know that I, for instance, can hand that partner a work package and it will be written up in time. It will be good quality. This is someone who will proofread the other parts of the proposal. So that is a really important component in trying to get repeated invitations to consortia. Most partners don't do that. A lot of partners feel like, oh yeah, I'll write my 3 pages of text. I send it to the coordinator, and then I sit back and wait until there's the next email requesting something. So being proactive in this process, I think, is very helpful if you want to be part of future consortia. Okay, well, I think especially for Julia, how to find a good consortium as a new researcher. So I can imagine that a number of you haven't actually been part of EU projects as a co-I or perhaps not even as a researcher. So how do you open that up? Well, I might not be the best person to advise on that because even my bachelor project was linked to an EU project. But these are the thoughts I have about it, and I just share them in the hope that they're somewhat useful. Again, I think the voluntary collaboration can be a really important point, particularly if they lead to some nice tangible output, like a couple of presentations or a conference paper or a journal paper, or perhaps they contribute to a deliverable a little bit. To develop that unique expertise, which I mentioned as well. A unique expertise doesn't have to be research in a certain topic. It can also be that you have a software tool that is unique, or perhaps you have a lab facility or an instrument that other people don't have access to, or it could be access to a certain data set. For example, perhaps you have exclusive access to some relevant UK data, or perhaps you've done surveys yourself that may be useful for other people. These can all be sort of unique selling points for future consortia. Networking is important because you may have something unique, but if you haven't published it yet or it's very early, then you may want to actually tell people that you have that. I think a good way to do that is, of course, normal conferences, but also very often you have these EU-centric research meetings. So, for example, in my domain, there's something called the Euro HPC Summit, or sometimes there's EGI conferences, like these kind of EU conferences where a lot of EU people come, but they're not necessarily core researchers. But for networking, they can often be quite effective. And then, of course, RSDO and the ERON network that Brunel is part of also give some opportunities. And I've also, there was one EU proposal from ERON that I've also been part of as a result of that. The last thing you can do, but I guess this may have to be nuanced a little bit. But one thing you could actually still do is you could take a lead at the proposal stage and let someone else coordinate once funded. And this is an interesting one, because as I described with VECMA, I declined to coordinate the project, but I did lead the proposal writing. In retrospect, I realized I actually could have coordinated the proposal and the project, because there have been many other junior researchers that I've seen with other projects that actually ended up leading the proposal and then coordinating the project.
Can I comment here?
Yeah.
We often use this model, and I know other researchers, that you become scientific coordinator, technical coordinator of the project. You don't need to be coordinator of the paper. And in fact, often Brunel researchers are invited to proposal on that role because they just validate expertise, know that they can't coordinate on paper.
Yes.
But in a way, effectively, at least scientifically, they coordinate. So thank you so much.
Yeah, so that's, for instance, with VECMA, that's what I ended up doing. I sort of coordinated the proposal writing, and then on the project, I was the technical manager, in my case. What is also interesting about that is if you lead the proposal and you try to form the consortium, when you invite partners to the consortium, they're quite likely to invite you back later on, because you're actually doing them a bit of a favor by including them in a new proposal. So, of course, the key is then to find another institution that would lead the actual project. But for most institutions, they don't mind that either, because the institution that leads a project usually gets some extra person months to handle all the administration, and there are a lot of institutions that are quite happy with that. So I think even as a junior researcher, that can be a very effective model. And for example, I think both Stamina and IT Flows, in my case, were led by a junior researcher. The PI of IT Flows, which is a €5 million project, was even a postdoc. She didn't even have a permanent job. So, and in my case, I was leading the VECMA write-up, and I was a lecturer for about 2 years at that time, so I was also relatively junior. I have no clue how I'm doing with time, but please do let me know if...
I think
Okay. Okay, very good. Okay, now so if you get invited to a consortium and you're part of the proposal, and of course the thing you would want to do is improve the acceptance chance. So yeah, how can you do that? So, well, obviously with the budget you need to qualify how many person months it costs to do a particular thing. My recommendation normally is to try not to be too fussy about it. Very often the call has constraints. Very often there's always 2 or 3 institutions that ask way too many PMs. And I think it's the best to let the PI sort that out. And on your side you say, okay, this is how much effort I think all the tasks take. And then let the PI scale the participation if they want to give you a bigger role or a smaller role. What I normally see is that the more you contribute to the proposal and the more unique expertise you have, the bigger your budget will be relative to the others. But in the end, the PI tends to determine that. If you want to have more budget, then yeah, basically, as I mentioned, you should think of more interesting tasks to contribute to the proposal and see if the PI accepts those, or actually spend more time working and improving the proposal. Because at the end, there are usually a few person months left, and you might then end up getting some of those. In terms of the research and the technical content, inconsistencies in proposals are very common, and I've had a number of proposals rejected because they were inconsistent, particularly when I had ongoing projects. So what I noticed is that my quality of contributing to EU proposals drops considerably when I have ongoing EU projects because I have postdocs to supervise, deliverables to write at the same time. But I do still participate in them because I do want to sort of know what is going on, and you know, I do my best effort, but I do, in retrospect, realize that the quality that I provided dropped a little bit. A lot of EU proposals are very repetitive. Fortunately, they shortened the format a little bit in Horizon Europe, which I'm very thankful for. I remember proposals of 300 pages, which was just painful. But yeah, be detailed, be specific, but avoid repetition. Just strip it, and there's no reviewer who likes repetition. I've not met a single one of them. And then what is also very specific for the EU is it's a bit like a football team of partners, right? Every partner has a role, and you really have to highlight the exclusive expertise from the different partners. And not only yourself, but also the other institutions, and really show like, okay, these partners all bring something new to the game, also in relation to other projects. And letters of support. So in the case of the Hidalgo proposal, there were these 2 half consortia competing against each other. One thing that got mentioned in the project review was a letter of support that I managed to get from the head of innovation from UNHCR, so the refugees agency from the UN. The reviewers explicitly cited that in their review as a mark of importance. So even though, yeah, it's not always taken very seriously. Actually, if you have a particularly strong one from an influential body and it's strongly worded, it can really make an important difference. Okay, now, EU projects can be incredibly unpleasant. Even when you get them funded, you think, okay, I've got the money, great, brilliant. But sometimes you just end up, you know, if you promise too much with too little effort or something, or you have an insane number of deliverables, it can become really unpleasant. And actually, a poorly formulated EU project sometimes actually diminishes your productivity rather than increase it. And it's not just about the big bucks, but you also want to get work done and actually enjoy it. So I've got a few suggestions for that. First of all, if you lead a work package, don't fill it with 20 tasks. Fortunately, the recent Horizon Europe guidelines are already a little bit about condensing it. My goal normally is to have 3 tasks. If it's a very big work package, you could do 4 or 5. But really try to narrow it down, because every task has to be managed separately. It can be very confusing. Even more important is the number of deliverables. Most partners are not very disciplined with it, but I think the guidance these days is 2 deliverables per work package. So yeah, I normally aim for 3 or less. But I've still seen proposals go in with work packages that have 6 deliverables, and I wasn't able to convince them not to do it. So this may be something you need to be quite strict about. If you have a deliverable and you happen to do something with software or something that is not a report, I strongly recommend doing so. Because in my opinion, software deliverables are much easier to compose than written reports, and the review process tends to also be a lot easier. So you'll find during the project it's much more pleasant to have deliverables that are not reports. Also, we had one proposal rejected because it didn't have software deliverables. So the Commission actually also cares about these in the case you do something software related. In terms of resources, being a PI takes time. Every EU project has their teleconferences, so you'll end up with a couple per week for those. So I would say that's, you should cost in 20% if you can, and if you have a major managerial role, like technical manager or something, or work package leader, you could even opt for more. For the COIs, people differ on that really a lot. Some people just invite 6 or 8 COIs, other people don't do it at all. My rule of thumb is normally that per full-time postdoc on the project, I go for 1 COI, and sometimes I may add 1 or 2 if there's a topic that is really important for the expertise in the consortium, and then I'll add those in. I don't like to have too many, because if you have too many captains on the ship, you'll spend more time coordinating and communicating than actually doing things. Okay, and then 2 slides about criticism. I'll go over that quickly, you can read it. Criticism I did come across, a lot about the composition of the consortium, as I mentioned. Lack of practitioners doesn't actually meet the explicitly stated eligibility criteria. You think surely the PI will take care of this. This has not happened on several occasions with me, so always double check it if you have time. Lack of specific background is often an issue. Some subtopic is not presented in depth. I had 1 or 2 cases where the project outcome hinged too much on a positive outcome of a single task, and then often it was kind of task like an experimental task, or for example data gathering through surveys, and that can really kill off a proposal if the whole outcome hinges on the data that is generated through an activity like that. So you want to have contingencies in place, I think, in those cases. Inconsistent proposals, I guess that's an obvious one. Recently I had a few where the dissemination and the exploitation did not reach a wide enough range of stakeholders. So there are a lot of coordinators who have a tendency to say, okay, we're going to publish in conferences, have papers, and do a few talks and write an article here. But for example, there's no exploitation, like interacting with either governments or industry, or actually things outside of academia. So that's been a weakness in proposals that I've been a part of about 3 or 4 times. Once there were no software deliverables, and that was a major reason for rejection. Criticisms, I have not seen much. Individual track records, not only my own, but in general, I've never seen the name of an individual be mentioned in a review of a consortium grant. It simply has never happened, and it's been 20 proposals, so I think can be safely say that. Also criticism about individual publications. There have been proposals where I thought, oh, well, these people don't really have very strong publications on that topic. Normally not referred to in reviews, in my opinion. Reviews that dismiss or discount UK participation, I have not come across it, and I have been on proposals after Brexit with 3 UK partners. I did not see any disparaging comment or say, oh, this proposal is too UK-centric, etc., etc. VECMA, for instance, was even coordinated by the UK, and it happened after Brexit. And also what I haven't seen, and unfortunately for my British proposal it has been a little bit different, but for the EU proposal I haven't seen many overly partisan or political reviews where the comments really seem to be sort of biased against either certain methods or certain groups, very colored or very opinionated. I've not encountered that in my experience. I can't guarantee that doesn't happen, but I've not seen it myself. And then the last thing that I say a bit as a joke is the EU versus UK funders. So in the EU it tends to be, please show us how you will reach the moon with our shoestring budget. Tell us how you will approach each individual phase and how you are going to accomplish every last one of your goals, of course, with a risk assessment. And then the UK is more like, please send us a picture of the moon and letters of support to prove how much money other people and organizations will give you for that picture of the moon. By the way, we will provide a shoestring budget as well, minus overheads. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And we really think that we have we kind of cannibalize some time because the process there, so we are still okay. So any questions for Derek for a moment? Derek will be here
until 1
until 20, so there is also will be opportunities. But any immediate questions?
Comments?
This is just a practical question I want to ask. I was involved in the proposal. Two issues that came up. I want to find out from you. One was how many EU participants you have of the proposal. And the second one was has to do with the funding in terms of allocating the budgets.
Yeah.
Right. So some of the organizations wanted more. So there was this sort of conflict within the consortium. So I was just thinking about how do you manage that?
Okay. Well, if you're not the coordinator, then it's not your final responsibility. You can give some very tentative suggestions, but I'm always very hesitant to be too forceful about it. It's very easy for me to be forceful. Yeah, I think in general, if you have, well, many EU consortium proposals have a budget, say, between 2 and 10 million. And I think most academic partners typically will want to hire at least a postdoc, so they'll end up at about 300k euros budget. So for example, if you have a proposal that is 4 million, then it seems like 10 to 12 or 13 partners seems a reasonable number, because you will want to have a few bigger partners. But yeah, it can vary a little bit. Sometimes there are non-academic organizations and they will draw much less funding because people sort of work on it on the side. And sometimes you have these institutions that have very high person-month rates and they will be very expensive. So for example, in Hidalgo we had the European Center for Medium-Range Weather Forecasting, and a person-month there costed 50% more than here. So their budget actually ballooned, not because they had more person-months, but because they had a lot of overheads, because they were an international organization. In terms of partners asking for more or less funding, I think the work they do should be leading. So if they have a central role in the project, then their budget should naturally balloon. But if they, for example, if a work package is not centrally important in the call, and they want more money for that work package, but it doesn't align with the actual call document, and that is, I think, a really good argument to say, okay, perhaps we shouldn't balloon that too much, but perhaps we should actually cut down some work so that you have your existing budget but less work to do with it. Does that help? Or? Okay.
My question is, based on your experience for junior researchers, do you think that asking for less money could increase the chances of getting that money?
So for the project as a whole, some people do it, and I've heard anecdotes that it can be effective. If you're, for example, if you have a 50 million budget and the maximum project budget is 5 million and 10 projects will be granted, some of the projects do go for 2.5 million, and then they might just be squeezed through, but also you only get half the money. I think whether you're a junior or senior researcher, I wouldn't expect it to make a huge difference. I think as a junior researcher, it's much better to scale up your effort on the proposal and to scale up what you can contribute rather than asking less money. Because what you want to get across is that you're really useful and important. And if you make yourself deliberately smaller, then I don't think you're going to increase your chances that you'll be included in a future consortium. So that's my opinion on it, yeah.
Do you have any feel how many non-academic participants should be in consortia? It's like 5 academic and 1 non-academic.
Oh, that's
like firm or NGO or some other organization.
It depends certainly on the call. Every call is completely different. I've been in calls where it was basically 8 academic institutions and 2 supercomputing centers. But for example, the Stamina project, which was about pandemic crisis management, had a fair number of companies, it had health authorities, I think across 6 or 7 countries, and I think the majority of organizations there were non-academic. The most useful thing you can do there is really look at the call document and also see what is expected in the consortium.
I think it's also might be, indication might be whether it's research and innovation action or innovation action. If it is innovation action, it's by its nature, it's closer to market, closer to reality, so we would have more, would expect to have more implementation stakeholders, like, I don't know, hospitals, industry, whatever sector it is. Maybe Phil have something to say about that as well.
Yeah, just echoing what both of them said, it's very specific to the call, and I've got some call information that I've pulled up for my next presentation, where it specifically says you need to work with, like Derek said, it said you need to work with industry or SMEs or with hospitals or something like that. So again, it's giving you a strong suggestion, and if you don't do that, then you're probably not going to get funded.
And I think some of the initials even have different funding mechanisms for academic and industrial collaborators. So sometimes you have to look for that as well. I recall there were a few calls where industrial companies could only get equity and not direct funding and things like that. So the call document, I think, is really important there. Yeah.
I think we stop here.
Okay, yeah, sorry to stop the good networking. I know you're all sort of nice. You're all enjoying seeing everyone face to face, so it feels a shame to have to stop that. But there's time at the lunch break to have a chat. So this second session that I'm going to be focusing on is looking specifically at upcoming calls with a September deadline, and this is specifically for Pillar 2. So I mentioned before the sort of much more kind of industry focused, the much more top down. The Commission says we want you to have a project in this particular area. There are, as you can imagine, a lot of calls that are in with September deadlines, but Julia sort of pointed me in the right direction of the areas in which hopefully are of relevance to you in the audience. So hopefully that is the case. If there is a particular call that I haven't covered that you would like to talk about, then we can pick that up during lunch or later on if you don't have particular time to do that. But again, it's just sort of following on. I think Derek did a fantastic job in sort of talking about identifying what you need to read within the call topics to be able to be successful in applying for European funding. And I'll be going through quite a few calls and hopefully highlighting that, and hopefully you'll be able to identify that as well. Before I get into all of this, I was talking to Julia before, and I thought I'd mention it now, otherwise I'll forget by the time we get to the end of my presentation. But it was just something we were talking about when Derek was talking about if you're a young researcher or inexperienced researcher, you haven't applied to European funding before, you don't have that European consortium to be able to sort of rely on and apply for future funding. What can you do to be able to sort of take the first sort of baby steps, so to speak, to be able to be successful? So what I would normally say is start with the kind of easier parts of Horizon Europe. I say easier in that it's easier to put together the proposal and work together with collaborators, but actually it's probably more difficult. The success rates are a lot lower. But being involved in the Marie Skłodowska-Curie Actions, so with the postdoctoral fellowships, with the doctoral networks, with the secondment aspects as well, they're a little bit easier to set up. There isn't a specific research idea you need to focus on. You have to come up with that, so you can discuss that with collaborators and then put together a proposal to be able to do that. Another area in which you can apply is these cost actions. I mentioned them right at the beginning. This is funding to support networking activities, secondments, meetings, conferences in very specific research areas. There are, at the moment, existing cost actions which are running, so it is possible to join cost actions which are already running. So I would strongly recommend just go and look on the cost actions website, search your keyword of your research area, and if you're lucky, there'll be a cost action which you can just join, and you've immediately got a whole load of potential partners which you could apply to Horizon Europe with. If you aren't as lucky, then it would be a case of setting up your own cost action, which you can do as well. You can apply. There's an annual deadline, but you'll need to get together quite a number of different collaborators across Europe and further afield as well to be able to do that. But if you wanted to, it would require a bit more legwork to pull that together. But that's, again, another way of creating these networking opportunities to be able to demonstrate you're a leader. As Derek was saying, being proactive and going out there and doing stuff, and then other people think, oh, we want to work with this particular individual, and then you can hopefully apply to bigger projects and be successful in doing that as well. So does anyone have any particular questions before we move on? Also, just in terms of the questions, there's quite a few slides that I will be going through, so if you have any specific questions on what I'm talking about, it might be best to interrupt me and ask me then rather than wait till the end, because we would have definitely changed subject by the time I get to the Q&A session. Okay, so just highlighting what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to talk about the Marie Skłodowska-Curie Actions postdoctoral fellowships, just talking about those. They have a deadline in September. Then I'm going to focus solely on Pillar 2. I'm going to explain what a work program is, because I'm conscious I haven't actually said what that is. I'm going to highlight the novelties for the current work programs, and there's a few big ones actually that you'll need to be aware of. Then I'm going to focus on Cluster 1, the health aspects, not all the calls, but some of the calls within the health and some of the calls within Cluster 5, climate, energy and mobility. And then we'll have a Q&A right at the end. Okay, so just to remind you, the MSCA that sits in Pillar 1, it's the excellent science pillar. Bottom up, you can decide in which research area you want to apply. MSCA, it's one of the most successful aspects of European funding. It's been going on for a number of years. It's all about supporting people, and it's all about this mobility aspect, moving people from one country or one area to another. It supports researchers at all their career stages. It supports PhD students, it supports postdocs, it supports academics and admin staff as well, giving them skills and international experiences to be successful. It encourages mobility. That was why it was set up many years ago, mostly transnational, but also looking at intersectoral mobility as well, moving from academia into industry on a secondment or into other areas, or vice versa as well, and also interdisciplinary as well. So you need to be thinking outside of your specific discipline. How can you kind of engage and experience working in a different discipline? It's set up there to respond to researchers' employment challenges. So I think across the whole of Europe there is a huge variation in terms of employment opportunity, employment conditions, working conditions between different organizations. And the idea of MSCA is that it will help to make those organizations have a much more kind of supportive working conditions for individuals. And it will work as a springboard for universities and their researchers to get into European funding, as I was saying before, to enlarge your research teams and to build a network of collaborators that you could potentially use to apply to other parts of Horizon Europe. There's 4 different schemes in MSCA. There's the doctoral networks, which is there to support. It's basically PhD funding for PhD for a number of years, where you can set up PhD students. The idea is that it's a network, so you need to have multiple different universities and other organizations involved as well, because there's this intersectoral, interdisciplinary element as well. So you need to be thinking about secondment, the PhD students going on secondments to industry or to other stakeholders as well. There's the postdoctoral fellowships, which, as the name suggests, is there to support researchers who are up to 8 years post receiving their PhD, and it's there for them to move to another country to be able to gain more experiences, and I'll be talking a bit more about this in the next couple of slides. There's the staff exchanges. This is the secondment opportunities where researchers or even admin staff are able to go on secondments for a short period of time to another organization, and vice versa. You can have people coming over to Brunel as well. So there's great opportunities for knowledge exchange. And then there's MSCA co-fund. Yes?
You mentioned another organization. It does not need to be in another country?
So for all of these, because there is this international element, you do need a minimum of 3 member states associated countries. So the staff exchanges, you have to be moving to another country, to France or Germany for these secondments. You can move within the UK, but then it would have to be intersectoral. So you'd be moving to industry or to another sector, or interdisciplinary as well. And then the final one, the co-fund, which is there, as the name suggests, it's basically supporting the doctoral and postdoctoral fellowships. So you can create schemes for those. but it's co-funding, so the Commission will only give you a certain contribution to be able to set up those schemes, and you'll have to find funding either internally or from national funding or other sources to be able to run the co-fund program. So just this is more just for information for you to digest at a later stage. These are the upcoming calls, so we know what the call deadlines are for 23 and 24 because the work program is a 2-year work program, and the work program basically includes all the deadlines for upcoming calls in MSCA. So the one that I'm going to be talking about a bit more is the postdoctoral fellowships. The deadline's the 13th of September. And then there's obviously more deadlines in 2024 as well. I mentioned right at the beginning that UKRI is the national contact point for the Marie Skłodowska-Curie Actions, and one of our roles as the NCP is that we organize these information webinars, which are all on Zoom these days. We have sort of tentatively published those dates for the webinars, and just to let you know, we were planning on holding these sessions for the postdoctoral fellowships in a couple of weeks' time, but unfortunately we've had to postpone that. Not for any, don't read into that too much into association or anything like that. It's not for those reasons. It's just one of the speakers has personal reasons, which means they can't make those dates anymore. So we're looking to rearrange those at a later stage. So if you are interested in the postdoctoral fellowships, then we will publish those dates soon, hopefully. I understand it might be beginning of June that we do that. They will be recorded, so if you can't make those dates, watch the recordings. If you're really desperate to have some help, we have the 2022 postdoctoral fellowship webinars, which you can look, which will be more or less the same if you do need some initial help immediately. And if you're interested in the others, those are the dates for you that you can look at a later stage. Okay, so just a bit more detail about these postdoctoral fellowship schemes. So what is it? You can basically do 2 separate types of fellowships with these postdoctoral fellowships. You can have the one on the left, which is the European fellowship, which is basically between a year or 2 years long fellowship where you have to, the postdoc, the fellow has to move from one country anywhere in the world to somewhere in a member state or an associated country, of which the UK is considered an associated country. So they need to move to that country. That's part of this MSCA. There needs to be this mobility. They move over there, and then they can do their fellowship within that institution. And they have opportunities to do secondments and placements, etc., whilst they're on the fellowship, and those can be sort of outside of their host institution. The other type is this, the global fellowship, the one on the right, where... Sorry, what? What does it stand for?
Yes.
Marie Sklodowska-Curie Actions. It's just the name of the scheme. Oh, sorry, where am I? Oh, sorry. It means member state associated country. So the EU, basically, yeah. Yeah. So the global fellowship, so this is where the fellow moves out of Europe, basically. So they need to be based in Europe, in a member state or an associated country first. They spend up to 2 years outside of Europe. Most of them go to the US. And then there's this mandatory 1-year return phase where they have to come back to the institution in which they came from to be able to transfer all the knowledge they gained whilst going on their fellowship. So these are the sort of 2 different routes that you can choose. If you are thinking of applying to these fellowships, then you need to sort of decide before you apply. When you apply, you need to say, I'm applying for a European fellowship or I'm applying for a global fellowship. It covers all research disciplines, all subjects, including Euratom. Euratom is nuclear research, so you can apply to do a fellowship in that as well. It's meant to cover all disciplines, but of course when it comes to the evaluation, you need to have specific panels set up. So there are 8 different subject panels that you will have to select for your fellowship. And as I said before, these projects can include research visits, short trips, secondments, non-academic sector placements as well. Looking at the European fellowships on the left, so the fellow has to be, they can be a researcher of any nationality, so there's no nationality rules for this. It's just more a rule on where they're based and where they're moving to. And they need to move to a member state or an associated country for up to 2 years. The optional secondments, yes?
By researcher, do PhD students who are graduating to become researchers qualify for this?
So there is a PhD eligibility criteria of up to 8 years post the moment you received your PhD. Marie Curie allow for breaks in your career. So if you've spent any time working in industry, for example, you can exclude that time within your eight-year calculation. If you've been on parental leave, for example, you can also include that time as well. But it is now limited to a maximum of 8 years post-PhD.
So PhD students who are graduating now can still apply?
So if you don't actually have your PhD certificate, then you can't apply. You'll have to wait for next year's one, basically, yeah. Okay, so... Yeah, so just to finish this off, so you can have secondments up to a third of the full time of this fellowship is possible, and now in Horizon Europe it's possible to add this sort of right at the bottom, this non-academic placement, an additional 6 months at the end of the fellowship, so making it 2.5 years rather than 2 years long, where you have to spend that 6 months in a non-academic institution. The global fellowships, as I said, you need to be based in a member state associated country, go to a third country, and then come back for a 12-month return phase. Again, you're allowed to do secondments during your outgoing phase, and again, you have this additional sort of 6 months non-academic placement as well. Okay, so any questions on that before I move on to the Pillar 2 stuff? Okay. Yes?
On the Marie Curie, the European, when it says the non-academic institute, the industry partner has to be in the UK, or it can be?
Can be anywhere.
Anywhere.
Within a member state or associated country, yes. Yeah, so it doesn't have to be the UK, it could be. But this is something, if the fellow is interested in doing this, it actually needs to be included in the proposal when you submit it. You can't add it on later, which is the slight tricky aspect. So you need to be thinking that far in advance that you think, oh, it would be great to do a sort of placement at the end. Yes?
Sorry, just a very quick question about eligibility. If I had defended my PhD 12 years ago, but have been only 6 years into academia and research, am I eligible in this case?
Based on what you said, yes, but maybe that's something you can drop us an email and we can check that through with you. But it's 8 years post-PhD, but you can exclude any non-academic career that you've had. So if you worked in industry or other places, you can ignore all of that and just include the time that you spent in academia. But again, drop us an email and that would be better, and we can check through that. Okay, so that was the Marie Curie postdoctoral fellowship. So now moving to the main part of this session, which is looking at the Pillar 2, the top-down, looking specifically at the clusters, the health and the climate, energy and mobility clusters. What is a work program? This is really, and sort of Derek mentioned this before, this is basically a document that the Commission creates every 2 years, where it includes all the information that you need about the call. It includes the deadlines, includes the call opening dates and the deadlines, and it also includes all the sort of eligibility rules that you need to include. It has a sort of preamble, it has an introduction, which I would really strongly recommend that you read, because that's where the Commission tries to weave together the kind of political priorities and the sort of outcomes that it's expecting you to do from your project, and trying to bring it together as well. So there are rules that you need to be aware of, and there's also sort of agendas or specific areas that the Commission is sort of pushing down. But in terms of actually how you address those outcomes and address and what you do is kind of left open to you as the researcher and as the consortium as well. So you have some freedom in how you set up what you're going to do within your particular proposal. These are 2-year work programs, as I mentioned before, so this is the second round of work programs. We had a 2021-2022 work programs which are now completed, so we have 23-24. So we know now all the deadlines for this year and next year, and we know the budget allocations, and then it's likely sometime next year, I imagine, the Commission will then announce the next work program for 25, 26, and potentially 27, the last year of Horizon Europe as well. You can access this work program in 2 different ways. The one way that I prefer is this sort of looking at it in that. There's a PDF document that the Commission creates. It's about 300 pages or something. They're very long documents. But I find it's a bit easier to navigate that particular document. The other way of doing it is looking at the Funding and Tenders Opportunities portal, which hopefully some of you have gone on. This is where you can find all the information about European funding, not just Horizon Europe, but all sort of all schemes that the UK is not participating in. So be careful when you're looking at those calls that you're not looking at calls that we aren't relevant to the UK. But that's the Funding and Tenders Opportunities portal. You can actually search by keywords as well, so that might be a bit useful if you're sort of new to this and you're thinking, oh, I don't know where to look. Just put in specific keywords and that will pull up the relevant calls for you. So the work program documents are split into what the Commission calls destinations, and really these destinations are the Commission trying to group together 10, 20, 30 or however many calls under one particular area to try and paint a vision of its sort of short term where it sees all of these projects working together. Where will Europe be in 5, 6, 7 years' time? So the Commission tries to sort of paint this picture. So I think it's quite useful to look at the description of what the Commission includes in those destinations for your particular call. So please do read that. And it sort of again links together sort of the high-level priorities, and then it kind of the destination is sort of the halfway point before you get down to your proposal, where you talk about I'm going to do this, and this is going to help address X, Y, and Z, for example, addressing COVID or the Green Deal, for example. I've shown you this slide already, so just to make you aware, there's a huge amount of funding, 13.5 billion euros available for the 23-24, the next 2 years funding. And then just to highlight a few novelties within this particular work program as well. One of the biggest ones is there's now something called lump sum funding, and I will talk a bit more about what exactly that is. There's 191 topics within the 2-year work program, which now require you to request lump sum funding rather than doing your actual costs, like costing and coming up with an actual figure. Now you need to come up and say, we're going to ask for €500,000 for example. I'll talk a bit more about this. Probably means a bit more work for Dina and the team for that, but I'm sure you've got it covered. Another big one is the Commissioner now introducing this blind evaluation. So for any 2-stage call, and there are quite a few. There's getting more and more 2-stage calls. There's still quite a lot of 1-stage calls, but 2-stage calls are becoming more common. So there's about 43, where at the first stage of the evaluation process, that will need to be, you must not mention any of the names of the people involved or the organizations involved within your first stage proposal. And then if you're successfully invited to the second stage, at that point, then you can start mentioning Brunel in your name, etc. But at the first stage, you're not meant to disclose your identity. And again, I've got some slides on that, so I'll talk a bit more about that later on. And then a couple of ones which are political, and you're probably not surprised to read those, but due to the current sort of geopolitical situation, Russian and Belarusian organizations are not eligible to participate in any capacity in Horizon Europe projects. And also likewise for Chinese organizations, but this is only specifically in the innovation actions, and I'll talk a bit more about what those are. So these are the higher TRL, closer to market projects. So you can't have any Chinese organizations involved in those specific innovation actions. They can be involved in research and innovation actions, the other type of projects that you could apply for, but just not these innovation actions. I should also mention, I forgot to include it in this slide, but The other sort of exclusions that you need to be aware of are the Hungarian universities as well. There's about 43 Hungarian HEIs that are being excluded due to political issues in Hungary as well. So just something to be aware of if you've got any Hungarian partners that you're thinking of working with in any future proposals. Just check where they're actually based and whether they're being excluded as well.
Sorry, Phil, about Hungarian, do we have, firstly, where to find this information? Because I'm talking with some Hungarian representation in Brussels now, it would be good to know. Plus, is it just public or private university? I think it was just private.
I'm not entirely. There's about 43 HEIs. I'm not sure. There is a list somewhere. I think on our UKRI portal we wrote an article about this, so that's probably the best place to find it for you. Yeah. But it's even something that the Commission, if anyone is involved in current Horizon Europe projects, you might have received an email from your project officer stating that you can't have Hungarian. You can't have for example, if you had a Hungarian academic involved in an advisory panel, that may be flagged as ineligible. So just something to be aware of, that you need to check all of these things, even with current projects as well. Okay, I'm moving on, make it slightly happier. So this is the deadlines. There's about 702 calls, lots of calls over the next 2 years. Just an overview of the deadlines. Some of the deadlines have already passed, but just to give you a flavour of what's coming up, maybe to give you an idea of some planning in the future. But a lot of these have already passed, unfortunately. The huge number coming later in 2023, and then obviously there's the 2024 calls as well. Where can you find more information? If hopefully after today's session I've whetted your appetite and you're thinking, I really want to apply for European funding, but I still don't know much. Luckily, the Commission is very good at organising information events, and now in the video conferencing world that we live in, it's very easy for them to get this information out there to the maximum number of people. So in the old days, it used to be you'd have to come to Brussels, you'd have to beg Brunel for some money to come over to Brussels, and they would do these events in a stuffy conference centre somewhere, and it would only be the people in the room that would know what the Commission said. These days, it's all on YouTube, and you can watch them at a later stage. You can see the dates. These were all held in December and January a few months ago. You can now watch them tomorrow if you wanted to. And I would really strongly recommend, if you are interested in applying to any of the upcoming calls, watch. You can speed through all the stuff that's unimportant, but go to the area where the Commission official talks about the particular call that you are interested in, because they will give it a certain nuance. They will add a bit of direction maybe that you might not get from just reading the very plain and boring text that you get from the call document. You can also look at who's attending it or see who's asking the questions, and again that will give you a sort of indication of who are the people who are interested in applying for these calls that you might be wanting to collaborate as well. These information events, the bit that you can't get involved in, unfortunately, is the Commission usually involve some sort of brokerage or matchmaking process as well. So if you do attend them live, then there's an opportunity to join these activities and potentially find partners. Whether this is a good way of finding partners or not is a debatable point, and we can talk over lunch over that. But it's something that the Commission does arrange as well. So I would strongly recommend looking at those, watching the relevant area for your research interests. The other UK national contact points, so not just UKRI, but there's a number of other ones supported by Innovate UK who support the different areas of Pillar 2, the different clusters. They've held their own webinars as well, where they have a bit more of a UK focus on the upcoming calls. So again, if you haven't seen those, when you get these slides, just click on that link. On Innovate UK, the KTN has all this information there. You can watch the recordings, you can download the slides. They're normally very good at having quite good case studies, so they'll have a UK partner talking about their involvement in a project. So it's always useful just to gain a bit more knowledge from learning from others as well. So again, strongly recommend you look at these recordings. And also, just to say, there's a newsletter you can sign up. There's NCP newsletters. So if you are interested in learning more from the particular UK NCP, then sign up to their newsletter, and you'll get their monthly newsletter in your inbox. And again, just to show you who all these lovely, friendly, smiley people are, these are the NCPs. Some of you will know them, some of you won't. When you get these slides, you can click on their name, and that will generate an email, so you can contact them. Or again, just put it into Google UK NCPs, and it will probably be the top one that comes out. And they are experts in all these different areas, so I would really strongly recommend contacting them if you have any questions about specific calls in your areas. Okay, I talked about this. This is just a screenshot of the portal, the Funding and Tenders portal. This is what it looks like. I think it's a really useful website. It's a much better website than the Commission have had in previous years. And as I talked about, sort of looking over here, you can search just by putting keywords. So in this example, I put in economics, and it just pulls up 107 different calls. You can sort of filter depending on the status. So if obviously you probably want to get rid of closed calls, look for open or forthcoming ones. The thing I mentioned before was just be careful that you've got these filters on correctly here, saying that you're looking only for Horizon Europe, because this platform will search every European scheme of which the UK can't participate in. So make sure you tick those particular ones. If you know European funding a bit more than others, you can actually filter in different ways as well. So if you're interested in a particular mission, or you know what the destination is, or you know which area of the work program you're looking for, you can sort of filter it in yourself. But it's a really good way just to put in keywords, and you can find out what's available within the upcoming calls. And then just before I dive into all the different calls, I thought I'd mention a bit more about the different types of actions. So actions is Commission speak for projects. What type of projects can you have? So the main one, which I imagine most of you will be thinking about, is the top one, the Research and Innovation Actions, RIA. These are the sort of lower TRL. It's usually TRLs 1 to 5. And it's looking at establishing new knowledge or exploring the feasibility of new or improved technology, product, processes, service, or solution. It could include basic or applied research. You need to read the call to see what it's focused on. There could be technology development, integration, testing, demonstration, validation on small-scale prototypes in a laboratory or simulated environment. So it's quite a vast array of research focus. And you'll need to, the devil's in the detail, you'll need to read the call to specifically see what the Commission is asking you to do. The other sort of main type of project that you can apply for is this Innovation Action IA, and as the name suggests, it's higher TRLs, tends to be 5 to 8 TRLs, much closer to market, much more industry focused. You would as Julia was saying before, you would expect if you were applying with this that you would have a large number of industry partners involved, and they may even be leading the proposal themselves, because it's all about sort of prototyping, testing, demonstrating within sort of the market environment rather than in a laboratory. That doesn't mean that you can't be involved in it, and you probably will have an important role to play within that particular proposal, but it's likely you might have a smaller role to play, and it will be the industry partners who will be sort of leading those particular ones. And the third type of project that you may be involved in is so-called coordination and support actions. And this is basically anything that you can't do in an RIA or IA. It's non-research. You can't do any research activities, but it's sort of things you could do are, for example, organizing conferences, networking opportunities, writing policy papers for the Commission, these sorts of things. If the Commission said we need someone to sort of develop a new network in this particular area, then they will have a call saying we want you to do that, and you would have to try and sort of build that together as well. So there's no research involved in it, but you can try and bring people together and work together. So again, that might be one, as Derek was saying before, to try and jump on the back of someone else, get involved in one of these projects, and that might help you to apply for one of these research innovation or innovation actions at a later stage. Okay, so I will quickly talk about the blind evaluation pilot because there are a number of calls, particularly in the health cluster, where there are two-stage evaluation process. And just to give you a bit of background of where this has come from, so there is this perception from certain areas of the European Union that the evaluation process is biased towards well-known organizations in countries with better performing research and innovation systems. And the Commission wrote this bit. A recent independent study has not revealed such bias. So the Commission don't believe it, but there you go. But certain other people do. So because of this perceived bias by a certain group of people, it now means that this pilot on a blind evaluation is being put into process for two-stage evaluations. And hopefully after this pilot, two things will happen. One, it will prove that this did exist, and so then every single Horizon Europe call will be two-stage and with a blind evaluation, or they'll say, no, there wasn't, and let's hopefully get rid of this blind evaluation, because I think, as you can probably tell, it's difficult to evaluate anything without actually knowing who the applicants are. I think it would be almost impossible to do that properly. So I think, the key thing there is the new admissibility criterion. So you must not disclose your organization name, acronym, logo, or names of any personnel in Part B of the first stage application. So I guess that's the easy bit. So just remove Brunel's logo. But you've also got to be careful if you're referring to a previous project that you were involved in. You can't say that it was your project. You'll have to just be more generic and say, referring to this particular project that happened before. So there are still, you have to be very careful in how you write your proposal, and you might have to actually change the language or get someone else to read it to make sure it is completely anonymous. So in terms of the process of how the Commission will do this, so the Part A bit is effectively the online form where you have to put in your name and Brunel's information. This can automatically, the Commission have set this up so it automatically blanks out Brunel's name and your name. It's the Part B, which is the actual Word document that you'll write and you'll PDF it, and that's effectively your research idea, the project. That bit's a lot harder to anonymize. And so the Commission will have to read through it, and if they notice that you've accidentally or intentionally left some way of recognizing who you are, then you will be your proposal will be inadmissible at that particular point, so you'll be pulled out. So there's an element of jeopardy there, so just be aware of that. And hopefully, again, if you've got any questions, then ask the team over here. They will have a lot of support for you. Yes.
Well, I have questions. For example, if you need to deliver projects, certainly infrastructure, and of course there is existing infrastructure. How you go about it? You have to say that we have electron microscopic facility, and that's how you describe it without mentioning where and what capacity, because then you can identify this. There's a lot of questions here.
Yeah, there's a lot of flaws in the process, but it's a pilot, so I think this first year we may see quite a high number of inadmissible proposals because people are learning, and then hopefully following that there'll be fewer, or they'll just get rid of the blind evaluation process because it doesn't work, basically. But
so can you also mention, is it Part A refers to stage 1 and Part B, or is it just two parts of some stage?
Yes, it's two parts of stage 1, and at stage 2 it will be Part A and Part B as well.
In stage 2 you are able to identify cells, remember,
So stage 1,
So this Part A and B is about the stage 1.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And part B at stage 1 is you only have 10 pages to write, so it's a very short.
So it's kind of expression of interest.
Yeah, effectively. So you don't have that much space to be honest. And then should you be invited to stage 2, then you have up to 45 pages So you've got a lot more space to go in, and you can talk about who you are, and you're not anonymous at that stage.
Just to ask a question for somebody at this single one. Does that mean that you're automatically rejected or you're given a chance to re-edit and resubmit?
My understanding is you're out, basically, yeah, at that stage. Yeah. Yeah, it is. So we'll see how this one works out. But I'm a little bit skeptical. Okay, I'll talk about lump sums before I move on to the call. So sorry, this is again, there's quite a number of calls that include this lump sum funding, and again, I'll just talk about where has this come from, because it does seem a bit strange. But this has come from the Commission's audit annual report, so the 2019 and 2020 reports, where they said that there was a high error rate in terms of audits, and this needs to be reduced. So the Commission are saying there's too many errors. This is taxpayers' money. We can't have all these errors in terms of the financing. Hence, where this lump sum idea has come from. And the way in which the Commission is going to achieve this is by having lump sum calls. This will mean in theory, much more significant simplification, because you won't have to, when it comes to reporting, you won't have to report on actual spend, actual cost. You just have to talk about, did we accomplish what we said we were going to accomplish? And if yes, then you'll receive the lump sum funding. So it should simplify things in that sense. And the idea is there should be less focus on a financial management and more on the content. Within the proposal, that is, more focus on the content. Of course, as for a university, it's really lump sum really just moves all the financial activities to pre-award rather than post-award, but there you go. I think this is something which probably the Commission will stick with and will become more popular. So the reason why the Commission do this is, if you can see in this graph, this is for Horizon 2020. So so they had over 40,000 beneficiaries in Horizon 2020, 7 years. This is the previous framework program to Horizon Europe. And you can see sort of over here, in terms of number of grants obtained, the lion's share only received one proposal from Horizon 2020. So you can see why there's so many financial error rates. Brunel and other UK universities are sort of off over at the 10 or 100 project stage. So we have more experience of the sort of financial reporting, but that's not everyone else's experience of European funding. Hence why this move to lump sum, particularly SMEs. They find it too laborious to do this reporting, particularly new organisations getting involved in it who've never been involved with it. They don't know how to do all of this. So how do you write a proposal? Well, you will just use the standard Horizon Europe application form, so there's no changes there. You'll need to present your objectives and methodology of your project, address the expected outcomes and impacts, much like you would for a standard Horizon Europe application. But you will need to include a detailed budget table, and there is an Excel file that you can download now, so download it. Again, speak to your support team here as well, and they will help you to pull together the lump sum, because you still need to do your cost estimations of how much it will cost. It just means in this Excel file, you will just say, for work package 1, we're requesting 50,000 euros. So rather than breaking it down, how much personnel cost, how much equipment, how much, etc., you just go, we want 50K for work package 1. So the idea now is that you will have a lump sum. It's not for the whole project, it's for individual work packages. So you will have to think about the structure of your proposal and how many work packages you will have. To remind you, a single activity is not a work package, a single task is not a work package, a percentage of progress is not a work package, and a lapse of time is not a work package as well. So you can't sort of try and create these work packages in those kind of ways. But if you did have a work package which was the whole duration of your project, such as management, dissemination, and exploitation, then you can sort of split those into smaller periods. Because if you had a work package that started on month 1 and ended in month 36, you wouldn't receive any funding until the end of it. So you'll need to think about how you split up the work packages so you can get funding at particular times of the project. And then again, there was a pilot run at the end of Horizon 2020, and this is just, again, this is sort of Commission data, where it shows that 44% of all the lump sum work packages were declared, of which 99% were declared as completed and paid in full. So again, this is a key thing that a lot of people get worried about, is that they think, oh no, what happens if I'm not successful in my work package? I said I was going to do A, and I ended up doing B, and that's perfectly normal in research. That's not the issue. The Commission will still fund that work package as long as it's been completed. So you did the activity and you got B. That's fine. You'll get the money that you requested in your lump sum. It doesn't matter that it wasn't A. So hopefully this will help simplify things. It's a new way of thinking, and it's probably more work for the support staff than it will be for you.
There's no extra work in preparing the budget. The only thing I need more detail is the split of your work between the work packages. So I need to know exactly what your team will work on in order to prepare that budget.
And in terms of keeping records, it should be a lot simpler. You'll just need the stuff in orange. You won't need the stuff
in yellow. So timesheets, pay slips, depreciation policy, invoices. You don't need to submit any of that to the Commission or to the auditors. Of course, you'll probably need to do that internally to follow your sort of internal rules. But it should make it simpler in terms of audits and for financial reporting as well. Lots of resources. The Commission is really putting out a lot of stuff in there. So if you want more information, then please do click on those links. Okay, so moving on to the call. So focusing on Cluster 1, just a quick introduction to it. It's there. This Cluster 1, this cluster will be there for the whole 7 years of Horizon Europe. So it's likely that, so it's not going to change for the next couple of years as well. The aim of this cluster is to fund activities aimed at improving and protecting health for citizens at all ages, developing innovative solutions to prevent, diagnose, monitor, treat and cure diseases, focus on mitigating health risk, protecting populations, promoting good health, as well as making public health systems more cost-effective and sustainable. It talks about this sort of, addressing the post-COVID recovery plan. So again, policy, the EU policy priorities, making the EU society more resilient, healthcare systems better prepared for future public health emergencies. So you need to be sort of if this is your area of research, think about how you can sort of, what you're doing is actually addressing these particular high-level political areas. And then there's these sort of objectives. So again, quite sort of high-level objectives, but also useful to maybe mention them in your introduction or something that you're kind of looking to contribute to these particular impact areas within the strategic plan. And at least that demonstrates to the evaluators that you've hopefully read the strategic plan, or at least you're linking it to what the Commission wants you to do. Within Cluster 1, the health, there's 6 different destinations. So this is the kind of midpoint, the sort of 4-5 year vision of where the Commission would like the funding it's putting within all those calls within that particular destination. That's where it wants you to address those particular areas. I'm only going to talk about the calls with deadlines in September. So that's really just those 5 destinations. So I've got quite a few slides to go through on this. So destination 1 is staying healthy in a rapidly changing society. So it's focusing on major societal changes: obesity, aging, demographic change, mental health, digital empowerment, personalized prevention, provides evidence, methodology, better strategies and tools for preventing diseases, and then it's got 4 different expected impacts. So this destination, so there's a number, there's probably 10 or 15 different calls that sit under this destination. So it's not just your particular project that needs to be addressing all those 4 expected impacts. You need to be thinking, how can your project, working with all the other projects that are funded under this particular destination, how are all of yours together going to synergistically work to meet these expected impacts? So don't feel you need to say, oh, we're going to, for our project, after 3 years, citizens will adopt healthier lifestyles, because that's not really going to be achievable. But how you are sort of answering the question that the Commission has in their call, by doing that will help to maybe get the citizens to think about different healthier lifestyles, if that makes any sense. I hope that's clear. Lots of confused faces, but when we go through these, hopefully this will make a bit more sense. Okay, so there's 2 calls within Destination 1 with a deadline in September. I'll just spend a little bit of time on this first slide because you'll see all the other slides will have exactly the same structure, so I'll just talk through this first one in a bit more detail. So at the top, I've just got the destination name, staying healthy in a rapidly changing society. The green table is the topic, so that's just the Commission identifier, that's what they use. The title for this topic is Towards a Holistic Support to Children and Adolescents' Health and Care Provisions in an Increasingly Digital Society. It talks about the action type, so this is a research and innovation action, so I mentioned before lower TRLs, 1 to 5-ish, but read the text to find out more of an idea of where you should be pitching your proposal. And then the Commission even tell you what their expected contribution per project is. For this one, they're saying between 8 to 10 million euros for a successful project. Now, this is just a indicative suggestion from the Commission, so it's not an eligibility criteria. So if you ask for 11 million euros or 7 million euros, that's not a problem. You won't be deemed ineligible. However, I would strongly encourage you to stick to whatever figure the Commission have said there, because usually what they're looking for is they're looking to fund more than one project. They might have a budget for this particular call of 20 million euros or 30 million euros. So then you can sort of read into that and see, oh, look, they're thinking of funding 2 or 3 projects. Therefore, if you ask for 12 million euros, they're no longer able, the Commission's no longer able to fund 3 projects, and then they're having to start to have difficult conversations about do they need to fund your project, which means they can only fund one other, etc. So think about those kind of things. I think Derek had a great sort of, he sort of went through the discussion of how you pull together your consortium based on what you think the budget is, and I think it's really good advice. So think about that. Think about how many partners you want, what you're expected to do, which is this is the Commission bit, and then how do I do that with 10 million euros? And then sort of break that down and think about, okay, I can do this and that and the other. And also it might even, depending on what this contribution is, it might affect how long you think the project is. So the call documents don't tend to say how long they expect the project to be. So it's up to you to decide, is this a 2-year project? Is this a 3-year project? Is this a 4-year project? You will need to kind of think by reading through this and sort of come to an educated analysis of what you think that particular length of the period is as well. This is a 2-stage call. So the first stage deadline is the 19th December. If you're successfully invited to the second stage, and you should hear within 2-3 months. So by the end of this year, if you apply to this call, by the end of this year, you should know whether you've been invited to the second stage. And if that's the case, then the deadline for the second stage is the 11th of April. So just to remind you, 2-stage, so it means blind evaluation at step 1, so you can't mention who you are, but you can at step 2. And then just a couple of other things. So this call mentions that there's elements of SSH, social sciences and humanities. So it says that this is recommended. You need to include aspects of that. And again, the nature of the topic, I think it's fairly obvious that you should be involving SSH. This isn't an eligibility criteria, so if you don't include any SSH element, you won't be deemed ineligible, but you won't be scored particularly well because you haven't addressed one of the areas that the Commission has mentioned. It's also a topic that's been flagged as lump sum, so you need to speak to Dina and get all your costings and all of that done beforehand. So there's a lot of information on these particular slides.
Sorry, generally you want to ask first stage call. How many pages it is? 10 pages, and it's only excellence and impact, isn't it? So a different template.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, they focus on slightly different things in terms of the scoring and how they score those successful ones. And then when you move to the second stage, it's the full excellence, impact, and implementation as well.
And what we also discussed, I believe, a different set of evaluators at first and second stage.
Yes,
which creates all kinds of interesting outcomes.
Yeah.
But anyway, thanks.
Okay, so I've pulled this information from the work program. This is not the whole information. There's pages and pages. I would really strongly recommend that you read it in detail. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, just a quick question I want to ask concerning the expected outcomes. Right, we have this challenge. Is it that for a single proposer, you have to achieve all those outcomes?
So the devil is in the detail. And I've been terrible.
I thought I'd bolded everything correctly, but I hadn't. So this one says contributing to all of the following expected outcomes. So you would be, in your proposal, they want you to address those three outcomes for this call. Other calls might say address one or two or some or several. So just be careful that you read it very carefully. And then I would also recommend being very obvious that you are addressing these outcomes as well within the proposal. Make it obvious to the evaluators that you are. Don't make it difficult for them to figure out if you've ticked all those boxes. Yes?
I have a question about more general about the stage 1 and stage 2. So if the first stage is 10 pages, and suppose I have an idea, I talk to 2 more other members of future consortium, and then I may be thinking about 2 more, but I'm not contacting them at the moment, or should I have fixed consortia at the first stage and I cannot expand it or alter it between the first and the second stage if I'm invited?
So off the top of my head, I think you can modify your consortium as long as there's no significant changes between step 1 and step 2. So you can't completely change it and bring in 10 different partners within it. There needs to be continuity between step 1, because obviously that's the evaluators have looked at what you submitted at step 1 and thought it was good. If you change it completely and submit something different, it's so I think you are able to change things if needed be, but it shouldn't be too drastic, the changes. And again, I mean, people are individual. Some people actually prefer writing the full proposal first and then writing the 10 pages after that. Obviously, I mean, it depends on individuals and how things are on that particular call, but yeah, hopefully there shouldn't be too much difference between the 2 versions that you submit. Okay, so just moving, yeah, so just going back to the work program, so there's a lot of blurb and background within the work program, which I haven't included in this slide, otherwise you wouldn't be able to read the text. But again, it's useful, it just sets the scene. I've just pulled out the expected outcomes and the scope. So these are the sort of key things that you really need to focus on. So again, just to reiterate, expected outcomes, for this one it says all the following outcomes, but read it very carefully. Make sure you do what they say. I think Derek gave a great example before of his unsuccessful proposals where they didn't tick all the boxes where they should have, and it just gets flagged and you won't be funded, basically. So make sure you read it carefully. Oh, and just to say, the sort of bolding is my bolding to try and pick out the key aspects. It's not the Commission bolding those, so I might have picked the wrong things to highlight on. But then looking on the scope, so the expected outcome. So this is where after your 2, 3, 4 years, however long your project, you need to say we did this. Children, adolescents, and their parents and carers are educated, empowered to prevention strategies involving personalized approaches, etc. So you need to be thinking, how can you get to that point at the end of your particular project? How are you going to get to the next one and the one after that as well? In terms of the scope, so again, this will vary depending on the particular call topic. So this one says the proposed R&I should focus on several of the following aspects. So there's 5 different bullet points here. What does several mean? I don't know. But probably more than 1, more than 2, I would say, not all 5, so maybe between 3 and 4. But you need to think about that budget, what is achievable, can you do all of those? Don't over-commit, because then you won't be able to achieve that, and the evaluators will see that. Don't under-commit either and just do 2 things, and they're thinking, well, why are you asking for 8 million when you're just doing 2 specific areas? So you need to sort of think about this, throw ideas around with your collaborators as well. And again, be very clear and specific in your proposal that you are you're addressing these particular things as well. Okay, so sorry, I labored the point on this one because it was the first one, but just to give you a bit of a flavor, and I'm very conscious of time as well, so I'm not going to dwell too long on these here for information. You'll get the copy of these slides later on if you're interested in them. I would strongly recommend you look at the work program. Yulia can help you with that, or contact me, and I can help point you in the right direction as well. But again, within the health cluster, there's a lot of two-stage proposals. Destination 2 is looking at living and working in a health-promoting environment, so filling knowledge and understanding the impacts of health and environmental, occupational, socio-economic factors. It's supporting the EU's environment and health policies, so the European Green Deal. So again, this is a high-level European political priority. Make sure you talk about that and mention it within your proposal and how your proposal is going to hopefully address the European Green Deal. If you don't know what the European Green Deal is, Google it and see what it, and read the documents. And the expected impacts are listed there as well for that particular destination. There's one particular call, which again is a two-stage call, which is listed there. And again, under the scope, maybe just to highlight on this one, it says applicants should focus on at least one of the following three aspects. So you could either specialize on just one, or maybe do two, potentially three. That might be a bit too much to be able to do within that particular budget. Destination 3 is tackling diseases, reducing disease burden, focusing on communicable and non-communicable diseases, strong international cooperation. So again, a clue that you need to be looking outside of Europe, not just European partners, but partners further afield as well, to develop new prevention measures, public health interventions, diagnostic vaccines, therapies, etc., and a huge list of expected impacts. There's a number of different calls on this one. I was just going to mention this particular call, which, because it's a different action type, it's a co-fund, and the title of this call is European Partnerships on Rare Diseases. Co-fund is really much like the Marie Curie one. The Commission is looking to part fund this particular project, and it's looking specifically at member states, ministries, other funders to be able to add some additional funding to be able to set up this partnership that will focus on rare diseases. It's something that universities tend not to join these partnerships. It would be unusual, but it's not impossible. But usually what happens is it would be ministries, funders, funding agencies that join this partnership, and then universities can apply to any upcoming calls that come from that particular partnership as well. I'll just sort of skip through these all as well. There's quite a few different ones here. Destination 4, ensuring access to innovative, sustainable and high-quality healthcare. So supporting healthcare systems in their transformation, ensure fair access to high-quality services. Creating synergies with the EU for health programs, so another European program that you need to be aware about and look at and think about what projects have been funded from that program and how we can talk about synergies that we can have with our project and anything that comes out of the EU for health program as well. There's one particular call with a September deadline, again another two-stage one as well, looking at access to health and care services of people in vulnerable situations. So again, I'm going to speed through these and you can look at these at your leisure. And then Destination 5, unlocking the full potential of new tools, technologies, digital solutions for a healthy society. So promoting the use of emerging disruptive technologies and health data for treatments, medicines, medical devices, improve outcomes with a strong consideration for safety, effectiveness, etc. So looking at tools and technologies with a medical focus. There's one call with a deadline in September, and that's looking at innovative non-animal, human-based tools and strategies for biomedical research as well.
Sorry, I was puzzled by expression human-based. That means experimentation on humans rather than animals, is it right? Oh, you don't know?
I don't know.
Yeah, what you or what is that?
I think the idea is to move away from animal testing,
yes,
but not necessarily using humans.
That's what I mean. So not test on humans.
It might be more sort of in silico, sort of computer-generated models of humans and testing on that. I assume. I haven't read it fully, but that's, yeah. I'm not sure. I wouldn't go through the ethics assessment, I don't think. Okay, and then just to wrap up, I'm going to touch on Cluster 5, which is the climate, energy, mobility, but I think in the interest of time, I won't go through all the calls, but they're all here if you would like to look at them. This particular cluster is there to accelerate the so-called green and digital transitions for Europe to achieve climate neutrality by 2050. So again, this is the high-level policy priority. try and sort of weave that into your proposals somehow as well. And it's there to support the Paris Agreement, the SDGs, and also to support the post-COVID crisis, European Green Deal, etc. All these sort of policy areas that you need to think about how to link your proposal to it. Within this cluster, there's 6 different destinations, of which for September those are the 3 different destinations which I've included in this proposal. But I think there are something like 40-odd calls within those 3 different destinations with September deadlines, which I'm not going to talk through because it's lunchtime and I think people are getting hungry. But just to be aware of, if you are interested in those, there's a lot of opportunities, 40-odd calls, so have a look through them. We can talk about it later on. Go onto the Funding and Tenders portal and put in your keywords. As I was saying before, that will bring up the relevant call topics, and then try and find partners, collaborators. That's probably the hardest bit of submitting a bid if you haven't got previous partners that you can lean on. So I think I'll probably just stop there for now. Does anyone have any particular questions, or we can have a chat at lunch? Yes, Hitesh?
Sometimes does it help to be in these public partnerships who are obviously formulating a lot of these work programs? If you're not in there, sometimes it's quite difficult to get into a consortium. Have you got any advice? I don't know, there are a lot of public partnerships, but you have to pay a membership fee to get into them.
Yeah, absolutely, and particularly Cluster 5 and Cluster 4 as well, there's a huge number of these public-private partnerships. So this is where industry basically pay to become a part of a network, and you have a very strong lobbying voice because the Commission listens very closely to these partnerships, and a lot of the calls, they write the call topics basically. So as Hitesh is saying, you need to be in the club to be able to be involved, and because of our sort of the UK situation at the moment, this might be a good way of influencing, because at the moment the Commission isn't listening to us as a UK partner, but they'll listen to us if we act through these partnerships. So, I would say, that's a discussion to have. It's a strategic discussion because of the cost of being involved in it, but if it's something that would be particularly relevant for Brunel, then that would be, I think it would be a good investment. Obviously, it can't be every partnership because that wouldn't be feasible, but I would focus maybe on the ones which are more significant. And it also gives you, for those of you who don't have collaborators, getting involved in these partnerships means you can access all these different people as well, so that you can potentially put in bids as well. So there's that added benefit as well. Okay. No questions? Okay, well then.
Say about partnership in-house. I just been recently to talk about this new transformation of healthcare. I think the type of partnership, and I think UK also part of this, or maybe MRC as far as I remember. So sometimes you can probably get with these partnerships through just talking to funding, what it is funding from let's say from UK or whatever country. But generally there are mechanisms, and we are part of PARC, right?
Yeah, we're part of chemical toxicology partnership. We were part of that proposal to set up that partnership, and yeah, you get 50% funding, so you have to make a case. 50% of your time is funded, and 50% not. But hopefully it does lead into further funding. Yeah, so we are part of one of the partnerships. They are generally set up now, so we're trying to get into them because they are already set.
Well, it's a good conversation to have and to see if they're willing to have UK partners, and is it a right time now to get involved in it, or maybe is there a better time in the future?
If anyone's doing hydrogen research, we're part of the hydrogen partnership.
Yes.
So,
Okay, I think everyone's looking hungry, so I'd just like to thank you for your attention, and if you've got any questions, then contact us.
Thank you very much.